Morning, everybody. So when I was a kid, I played some sports. I played basketball, and I think you've heard me talk about that a little bit. But I also played a very rigorous, athletically challenging game known as T-ball. Everybody play T-ball? Kids play T-ball? Yeah. Yeah, now, this game is particularly difficult to master, which is a load of baloney. This particular game is incredibly simple, right? For those of us who just can't play baseball very well, T-ball was the nice answer. Or if you were young and you're just learning the basics of the game, T-ball was it. Essentially, it's like baseball, except, as you can see, the ball rests on a really easy, here it is, tee, right? It's like a giant game of golf, essentially. It's just there for you, and then when you're ready, the little guy waddles up to the tee and he swings and hits the ball, and then everybody on the field, all of them, chase after the ball. That's how it goes, right? T-ball. But in any sport, whether it's T-ball or basketball or anything like that, the one lesson that I heard again and again and again, the one lesson that I taught when I was a coach, was you have to have follow-through. Everybody say follow-through. You have to have follow-through. Now, if you're playing basketball, if you're playing any sport where you're throwing a ball, follow-through is essentially, after the moment of release, continuing on in that motion, right? If you're playing a game where you're smacking a ball, or you're smacking a puck, or you're smacking something, follow-through is that moment right after impact where you continue on in the motion that you were going. Does that make sense? Follow-through. Now, follow-through is incredibly important. It is. It's incredibly important to the game, to most games, actually, because if you don't have follow-through, then very little is actually going to happen. Let me show you. Okay. Are you ready? All right, I took my steroids this morning, so I shouldn't be right? So, I'm just going to get knocked over. All right, so there are three parts to a baseball swing. I'm an expert, so pay attention. Three parts, right? You have the swing, which is all the energy that's built up, right? Your muscles are contracting, and then all this stuff, right? There's a lot of potential energy right here in the swing, right? Then you have the impact, which is the moment where your bat or your stick or your whatever actually hits the ball, okay? Then you have follow-through. So, swing, impact, follow-through. Three parts. Got that? Go slower if you want. Okay. Like I said, this is a very difficult game to master. So, if we don't have follow-through, okay? So if we just have swing and impact, here's what happens. Okay, you ready? That's about it, right? See, what happens when you don't have follow-through is that you actually slow down on everything else. Right? When you say there's not going to be any follow-through, then your swing, you actually slow down right before the moment of impact, and so then there's very little energy and the ball doesn't go hardly anywhere. In fact, somebody once said that if there were no follow-through in track, where there's no ball, if there were no follow-through in track, most world records would be a lot slower. Because if every runner stopped immediately at the line, then it would be a lot slower. They'd start slowing up. Otherwise, their momentum carries them forward. That's why when you see somebody running, they're running, and they run several feet past the finish line. Somebody suggested if we put those tests for the world records at the edge of a cliff, that the world records would be a lot longer too. Yeah. See, here's the thing. When you have follow-through, it changes what happens to the ball, right? As I was doing all the study for all this stuff, I discovered that follow-through affects trajectory. Follow-through affects trajectory. When you follow through, it affects where the ball is going to go. So if I follow through and I go like this, right, and I follow through that way, the ball's going to go that direction. Some of you remember Babe Ruth, right? He used to point to wherever he thought the ball was going to go. Usually he was right on target, right? When you follow through, it affects your trajectory. If I follow through like this, right, you know the ball's going down there. Same with basketball or anything else. When you're shooting the ball, you're supposed to point to the basket, because that's where you want it to go. Follow through affects trajectory. I'm sure that won't have anything to do with the rest of the sermon. Hopefully you know better. Life, I'm going to carry this around just for intimidation. Life is messy, right? Say that with me. Life is messy. We've been learning about that, studying about that, thinking about that, how messy life is. How there's gray areas in life where we wish that there were cut and dry answers. There aren't always, right? Where we wish everything was a happy ending, it isn't always at the end of the day. There are times of struggles, times of confusion, times of question and doubt. And so, last week we talked about compassion. Everybody say compassion. Compassion. We figured out, okay, when other people are suffering, when other people are struggling, how can we step into their mess? How can we step into their suffering space, get messy with them, and help walk them out of it? Or walk them through it. Life is messy. Today we're going to look at this idea of follow through. And so if you have a Bible, I encourage you to go to the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes is a wisdom book. It's in that genre of biblical literature, wisdom. The book of Ecclesiastes is written by who we think is King Solomon. Solomon, of course, is the man, the king, who asked God for wisdom. You might remember that. And God granted him wisdom, but he also gave him riches and all sorts of things. King Solomon. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, the writer, he goes through these various arenas of life. He goes to work and he studies work and what all goes into work, and he says, oh, it's meaningless. And he goes to relax, and he goes to take some R&R, and he indulges in all these luxuries and pleasures, and he says, oh, that's meaningless. In fact, that word meaningless is mentioned again and again and again and again and again throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, because it gets to a point where it's pointless. Some of these things, they just waste away, and they wither away, and they disappear. Meaningless. Ecclesiastes. Actually, in the book of Ecclesiastes, that word ekklesia becomes the Greek word, which means gathering, or assembly, or grouping, or congregation, or church. And so, in the Greek, the word ekklesia means church. Gathering of people. And of course, you know, where there are people, there's potential for a mess, right? Because people are messy. That's how we are. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 is where we're at. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, starting with verse 1. Angela read it. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen, rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools, who do not know that they do wrong. Guard your steps as you enter, as when you go near the house of God. Don't listen, rather than offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong. So today is about follow through. Paying attention to what we say. A while back I did a message on words and the importance and the significance of words and how powerful they can be. And the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 5 seems to say that when we come into God's house, we should be careful. Go near to listen. Pay attention. Don't offer the sacrifice of fools. Now, you might ask, what is the sacrifice of fools? I love that language there. And it's pretty easy to pick out, okay? from that sentence what he means by the sacrifice of fools. What's the opposite of listening? Talking, right? Talking. I'm learning as a husband. Sometimes I need to just shut up, right? I have this habit of always trying to finish my wife's sentences because I think I'm savvy to what she's thinking. I'm learning. Husbands have no idea what their wives are thinking. And so rather than tick them off by trying to finish the sentence, just shut up and listen to what she has to say. And the same thing happens when we come to the house of God. God, who is all-knowing, all-powerful, all in all. Sometimes we try and finish his sentences, and the writer of Ecclesiastes says, shush. Go near to listen, rather than to try and babble on like a fool. The writer of the Pilgrim's Progress, which is a spiritual classic, I encourage everybody to read Pilgrim's Progress. I encourage you to find a modern-day language translation of that, because Old English is a little difficult sometimes. But Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. John Bunyan once said, "Better to have a heart without words than words without a heart." Essentially, better to be listening with your heart than to be talking with your mouth. Sometimes we say things and we say things and we say things and we say things and we just keep talking and talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. And sometimes you listen to somebody who's talking and talking and talking and talking and defending themselves and saying different things and trying to justify stuff and trying to over-explain things, and they just talk and talk and talk and talk, and there can be a lack of heart behind that, a lack of genuineness, a lack of care involved. Bunyan says, better to have a heart without words than words without heart. Back to Ecclesiastes, the writer continues with this idea. He says, do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven, and you are on earth. So let your words be few. Do not be quick with your mouth. If you're like me, you have this habit when you see a problem or when something arises or somebody asks you a question or they start talking about their own problems. I have this habit sometimes where I want to just fix it. I just want to explain the solution right away. Don't be quick with your mouth. Don't be hasty in your heart. So it's not just the words that come out, it's the words that are coming in. Right? The things that are happening inside of our hearts, inside of our minds. How many of us, we think we've got this under control? I know when to shut up. So you sit there, and your mind is racing. They're talking on and on about something. And you're saying, oh, this is so stupid. I wish you would just, I could tell them how to fix this. I could do it. Yeah, no, I know. Or we come into church. You know, this is focusing on our utterance before God. We come into church and we know the appropriate times to stand up, the appropriate times to sit down. We know the appropriate times to sing. I don't, obviously. We know the appropriate times to be quiet. We know all this stuff. But in our heads, we're thinking about all sorts of things, right? And the author of Ecclesiastes says, don't be quick with your mouth. Don't be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. I think of it this way, right? I put on several diapers on Parker. I haven't actually put them on. I put diapers on. See, word placement is incredibly important there. I put diapers on Parker lots of times, and if I'm too quick in putting a diaper on, if I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, okay, make sure all the flaps and the things are where they need to be, okay, disaster can occur. Things can get messy. Don't be too hasty to utter anything before God. Even if it's something good. Even if it's something reverent. Even if it's something holy. Don't be too quick, the writer says, because he is God. He's in heaven. You're on earth. So think about what you say. Think about what you pray. Think about what you promise. Let your words be few, he says. There's a condition that's going around, an illness. And it's pretty serious. It can cause broken homes, can cause broken relationships, can cause embarrassment and humiliation. It's diarrhea of the mouth. Where sometimes our words just kind of spill out. And they overflow out of our mouths, and we say things that we don't mean, and we say things that we don't think about. We just say things to fill up silence, because silence is awkward and scary, and so we just speak and speak and speak and speak and speak, and it's real messy, and most of the time it stinks, and it makes a mess, and sometimes people just wish we would get a handle on it. Diarrhea of the mouth. Listen always. Speak humbly. Especially in prayer. One of my favorite movies growing up was the movie Space Jam. Anybody seen the movie Space Jam? Came out in the, let's see, and the movie Space Jam, let me explain the very Oscar award-winning plot here. The movie Space Jam is about some cartoon aliens who come to Earth and they want to kidnap the Looney Tunes so that they can use them in their amusement park on their own planet. And so the Looney Tunes decide to challenge the aliens to a game of basketball. That's how they're going to beat them. The aliens think this is a brilliant idea, so they kidnap several NBA players. They take their NBA talents, and the Looney Tunes then coerce Michael Jordan to play for their team, and ultimately the Looney Tunes win. Very deep stuff this morning. So anyway, there's a scene in that movie which I think is very funny, with the NBA players who have lost their talents. They're going to the doctor's office, they're going to the hospital, going to see psychologists, and getting all these tests done, trying to figure out what has gone wrong, because they don't know. It was all done in secret. They're trying to figure out why they can't play the game anymore. And they're doing all sorts of stuff, and nothing's coming up. And Charles Barkley, if you know Charles Barkley, he's a very vocal NBA player. Charles Barkley decides he's going to turn to faith to get his answers, and so he goes to church, and he's sitting in church, sitting in the pew, and he's praying to God. He says, God, if you give me my power back, give me my skills back, I'll never trash talk again. He says, I'll never get another technical. And he thinks about it for a little bit. Some deep meditation. He says, I'll never dig the dime again. And it's a funny scene, except to anybody in here. And it's a funny scene, but we do that all the time, right? We say, God, if you just, then I'll, right? If you just give me that promotion, then I'll put more in the plate. God, if you just fix this relationship, then I'll make sure that I'm in church every Sunday. Every Sunday. God, if you do this, then I'll do this. But the reality is, when we say those things, when we offer up these very heartfelt, intense prayers in the middle of our own private crises, in the middle of our own mess, there's a lot of emotion and a lot of passion and a lot of promise that's involved in the early part of this. And so we offer up these prayers and these thoughts, and then something happens. And there's very little follow-through. There's no follow-through whatsoever. In fact, as soon as something happens, as soon as the crisis resolves itself, either good or bad, we often forget about these practice swings. These empty promises that we threw up to God in a hasty moment of emotion. Follow through. Follow through. Everybody still with me? Good. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 continues on. It says, a dream comes when there are many cares, and many words mark the speech of a... Say that word with me. Fool. When you make the vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It's better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Don't let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not protest to the temple messenger, my vow was a mistake. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, fear God. Essentially, the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying, empty promises are a waste of time. If there's no intention on following through, if there's no intention of actually carrying on what we've promised, then why even make the promise in the first place? If you have no intention of swinging at the ball, then why even step up to the plate? We can dream, and we can plan, and we can get committees together, and we can get our groups together, and we can have these deep thoughts and these discussions and debates, but if there's no follow-through, then it doesn't really matter. In fact, the author of Ecclesiastes uses his favorite word, and he says it's just meaningless. Therefore, fear God. Because when God hears you say, God, I'm going to do something, He expects you to do it. Or when He hears you say, God, I will never, ever, ever, He expects you to follow through. Fulfill your vows, your promises. A lot of times when we think about the word vows, right, we go back to our wedding. That's really the only time that anybody uses that terminology anymore, is in weddings. Everybody exchanges their vows. Vows are important on that day. It's a promise. It's a covenant. Promise between spouses and God. You exchange promises about what you're going to provide and what you're going to be and what you're going to do for the other person throughout the duration of your relationship. I found some vows. Wedding vows. Here's one. I promise to be true to you, to uplift and support you, to frustrate and challenge you, and to share with you the beautiful moments of life. Someday, if the stars align, I might even let you win an argument. Here's another one. I promise to love you as much as I love my credit card, and not hold your poor fashion sense against you. I will only show you my new clothes during commercial breaks, and promise to keep you in the latest Cub fashions. With a capital C. From this day forward, I will make sure that your lucky shirt is washed for every game day, and will have plenty of potato chips on hand. I will love you for richer or poor, as long as our credit card limit stays high. Here's another one. From this day forward, I promise to declaw my cat Fluffy so that you are not scratched. I will always make sure that the litter box is clean and will keep Fluffy out of Spot's house. I will love you for richer or poorer so long as Fluffy gets gourmet cat food. Here's one. I, Matthew, take you, Emily, to be my awful wedded wife, to have and to scold, from this day fast forwarded, for better and but not worse, for richer and poorer, forget sickness, only in health, to loathe and to cherish, till suspicious death do we part. I promise to love you even when you refuse to let me watch football, to cherish you even when you blow 1 week's salary on yet another handbag, and to understand you even when you're mad at me because of something that happened in a dream. Last one. I love you. You're my best friend. Today I give myself to you in marriage. I promise to encourage and inspire you, to laugh with you, to comfort you in times of sorrow and struggle. I promise to love you in good times and in bad, when life seems easy and when it seems hard, when our love is simple and when it is an effort. I promise to cherish you and to always hold you in highest regard. These things I give to you today and all the days of our life. People in general like weddings. The reason why is weddings offer a lot of promise, right? They offer a lot of potential. There's all this buildup and all this energy of the whole courting process, the dating process. There's a lot of emotion and passion built into those last days leading up to the marriage. Everybody's excited, right? The couple stands up here and they exchange vows, and for a brief moment, everybody in the audience, everybody in the crowd, hopes and prays that they keep those promises. They hope and they pray that there is actual follow-through to what both of these people have offered up. Because deep down in our soul, we want to follow through. Deep down in who we are, we want to keep our promises. But it's hard. And it's messy. And it's difficult. And it's painful. But without follow-through, the marriage is never going to go anywhere. Without follow-through on those vows, it's not going to be much longer after that ceremony, and the wedding just kind of clinks to the floor. In Matthew chapter 5, you don't have to go there, Jesus is delivering his Sermon on the Mount. You guys remember Jesus, right? Jesus is delivering his Sermon on the Mount, his only sermon where he covers a bazillion topics. Obviously, he didn't go to Bible college. He covers a ton of different topics all in one sermon. And it's probably no coincidence that in Matthew chapter 5, Matthew's laying out this sermon that Jesus preached to thousands and thousands of people. Jesus speaks about a lot of things, and as he's going along, he talks on adultery, and then divorce, and he follows that up with oaths, vows, promises, keeping them, to be specific. Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, you might remember, says, "Let your yes be yes, and your no be no." Don't swear on something. I swear on my mother's grave that I'm going to do. Don't do that. Okay? There's no reason to do that. Just when you say you're going to do something, do it. When you say you're not going to do something, don't do it. So, when you make these promises, I promise to love you, to cherish you in sickness, even when the doctor's bills are so stinking high and you go into debt because of it. For richer, for poorer, even though you come into the marriage and you have $85,000 in credit card debt. Till death do us part. Even when it's hard, even when life gets tough, even when our personalities butt heads, even when there's all this anger, even when there's all this miscommunication, follow through affects trajectory of our relationships. And Jesus says, keep your promises. The writer of Ecclesiastes says, fulfill your vows, otherwise there's no reason in making these promises at all. See, because follow-through develops character. And follow-through develops credibility. Think about when you're parenting. Most of you have been parents or are parents. Well, I guess once you've been a parent, you're always a parent. You're grounded. No going out this week. You have to clean up your room. But they're going out and it's just for an hour. Okay. It loses credibility that way, right? No follow-through on your promises. Or you say, tell you what, you get straight A's, okay? Then we'll go to the water park. Oh, but see, I gotta work that weekend. And then the following weekend is our trip, and so we can't do it then. And then you know, Grandma wanted to have you over the next weekend. So, but I promise we'll go eventually. No follow through. Right? Oh. Here's one. I promise I'm going to invite my neighbor to Easter. That is so awkward, right? And, there's never really a situation where I can just walk up and, hey, you want to come to Easter? That's just weird. And, and they're never really talking about Easter. So, I'll try. Here's one. I have to be careful with this one. Whatever you need, anything at all, I'm there. Or I'll pray for you. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get young families in church. A lot of excitement, a lot of passion, a lot of potential and promise. If there's no follow through, then it doesn't really matter. See, it's going to be hard. It's going to be awkward. But the more that you follow through, the more natural it's going to be. In fact, experts say that the more that you think about your follow-through in sports, whether it be baseball or golf or anything like that, the more that you think about all the steps that are involved, the worse you're going to do. So the way that you get better is you just do it. Develops character, develops credibility, develops Christ within you. Follow through. Effects, trajectory. we say that we love people unconditionally, then we have to love them unconditionally. If we say that everyone is welcome, then we have to welcome everyone. If we say that we want to follow Jesus, then we have to follow him everywhere he wants to go. Because follow-through affects the trajectory of our relationship with God, affects the trajectory of our relationship with other people, it affects the trajectory of every relationship with everyone that we've ever made promises to. Imagine, since spring training just started, imagine watching a baseball game where all the batter did was this. Be pretty boring, right? But when a batter practices follow-through, when a Christian practices follow-through, when they keep their vows and fulfill their promises, then, and only then, will the relationship It's a whip ball, folks. Calm down. I know, right? We listen to these sermons, and by the end we all feel beat up, right? Because we've all broken promises to God. We got to stop it. We've got to keep those promises to ourselves. We've got to keep them for other people. Because people will never learn about who Jesus actually is if all they see about him in us is betrayal and broken promises. Fulfill your vows. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for all that you blessed us with. And we just pray, Father, that you would give us the courage and the boldness and the strength, the fire and the follow-through that it takes to live this life well. To take the relationships that you've blessed us with, to bring them closer to you. God, we have to follow through. Because if we don't, those relationships are going to stumble and fall. And they will never take off. Father, give us what we need. Lift us up. In Jesus' name we pray.